Hello everyone, it's good to be with you once again. Today we hear again from Matthew's Gospel a great story in which Jesus is asked that question, is it lawful to pay tax to Caesar or not? And the Lord, he's put in a pickle here. If he says one thing, he sides with Rome. If he says another thing, then he sides with people. And he comes back with that great retort, repay to Caesar what belongs to him and give to God what belongs to God. And Jesus makes a point here by asking for a coin. Now, this is very clever too, because if one of the Pharisees or the Herodians had a Roman coin, well, that was problematic because the Roman coin had the emperor's image on it and it was considered a graven image because the Romans considered the emperor divine. So for a Jew to have a Roman coin was not a good thing. There was yet another little twist here, because the Jews knew that human beings are created in the image of God, and we say that our lives are the dominion of God. So the Pharisees and the Herodians here, trying to trap Jesus, failed to cooperate with God in that they refused to believe in Jesus and his authority. So therefore, once again, Jesus confronts people here. All of creation is under the sovereignty of God. And so we, who are imbued with his sovereignty and profess our faith in it, have to learn how to live or relate to the empire, so to speak. It's fascinating nowadays to hear how people are having trouble choosing candidates, for example, or making moral choices on many parts of their lives. And I mean, this is not new for sure, but all of us are challenged every day by making choices. And so this is a great way for us to answer that question about give to Caesar and give to God appropriately, how deeply our religious convictions and values are within our hearts. And you see that dialogue between the religious sphere and the political arena around us. That goes all the way back, as you can see, from the prophet Isaiah here. Now remember, he preached to a people in exile. And Cyrus, the king of Persia, what is now Iran, was called God's anointed, or Messiah, because it was believed that Cyrus, as king of Persia, would defeat the Babylonians and release Israel from their captivity. Even though Cyrus didn't know that the Israelites were calling him God's anointed. And Isaiah prophesied, God is the Lord of all things and made the earth and made human beings, and God's servant or anointed one will deliver you. That's pretty fascinating given the state of the world right now, and not specifically about the pandemic, but specifically in the United States. And, we have to be very careful here when talking about politics and religion. But you can see how we are constantly in between things, especially now we near this important election. We're all challenged by Jesus to look deep into our hearts and to see how we can be faithful to our religious convictions, our values, and see what is best when we go in to vote. And we must consider and see who and what will be best for the common good. And that phrase, the common good, comes out of the Acts of the Apostles. It comes out of the gospel itself, and it's reiterated time and again by Pope Francis in his latest encyclical, Fratelli Tutti. And it does come from the writings of St. Francis, and that's a whole other lecture in and of itself that I won't go into, but it has to do with fraternity. And fraternity You have to go a little beyond English because we think in terms of Greek stuff on campuses. A fraternity is for guys and sorority is for girls. That's not what this is. Fraternity is defined as a group of people sharing a common profession or interest. For example, we have the first order, that's us, of friars, and the second order are the poor cloistered nuns, and the third order of St. Francis, which is for everyone else, whether you're married or single or celibate, a priest, anyway. Those little communities of third order people or secular Franciscans are called fraternities. And in Fratelli Tutti, the Pope's encyclical, he claims that fraternity, brotherhood, and sisterhood calls for something that enhances freedom and equality. And this is why I bring this up, because I want to introduce you to this new encyclical because it is rather beautiful in its scope and in its theology and in its relevance for our particular world situation right now. And the Pope asks this question: what happens when fraternity is not consciously cultivated? What happens when there is a lack of political will to promote the common good through education, through dialogue, through the recognition of our values of reciprocity and mutual enrichment? You see, what he's doing is allowing us as Christians, and Catholics in particular, to see ourselves as people who are concerned with everyone. And he talks about religious freedom, not as we sometimes often hear on CNN and other news outlets, that religious liberty, it has to do with personal freedom and an awareness of other people. Liberty becomes nothing more, writes the Pope, becomes nothing more than a condition for living as we want to. Completely free to choose to whom or whatever we want to belong, or simply to possess and exploit. And this shallow understanding of liberty has little to do with the richness of a liberty directed above all to love. Again, his words empower us to see within ourselves what we've been given by virtue of our baptism and our religious heritage as Christians, and particularly as Catholics. This Sunday we hear from the very first thing written in all of New Testament literature, Paul's first letter to the people of Thessalonica. It's the first letter of the New Testament age. And in there he wrote, "For our gospel did not come to you in word alone, but also in power and with the Holy Spirit and with much conviction." And we have to constantly be reminded of that, my friends, that you and I hold in our hearts, yes, these values that come from the gospel, but we also have from God the power of the Holy Spirit to live out those values and convictions. We have within ourselves everything it takes to be faithful to gospel values, to see what is best for the common good. That is right out of the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, and certainly is at the very heart of what Jesus gets at here in the writing of Matthew, in this whole give to Caesar and give to God, that dialogue that is constantly going on within ourselves, where we can understand and see how deeply our faith really permeates our entire existence. Every decision you and I make, hopefully, is colored by the gospel, and I mean that in a very positive way. And I want to end with today's reflection with this beautiful passage. It's paragraph 277 from Fratelli Tutti. And I give it to you because of the great musical heritage that has been at Ascension for years, and an image that the Pope uses here about the music of the gospel, okay? So listen carefully. It's a little long, but I think it's quite beautiful and elegant and very pertinent for who we are as people of peace today, looking for what is best for all of God's people in our country. So, Pope Francis writes, Christians are very much aware that if the music of the gospel ceases to resonate in our very being, we will lose the joy born of compassion. We will lose the tender love born of trust. We will lose the capacity for reconciliation that has its source in our knowledge that we have been forgiven and are sent forth to forgive. If the music of the gospel ceases to sound in our homes, public squares, workplaces, political and financial lives, then we will no longer hear the strains of the gospel that challenge us to defend the dignity of every man and woman. Ruminate over that beautiful image that Francis gives us, the music of the gospel. It is the melody coming from the Holy Spirit that enlightens us and helps us carry the load that life brings each day so that we can make good, solid decisions that are rooted only in our faith in God through the power of the Holy Spirit and the example of Jesus. So, my friends, have a great week. May God continue to heal our world and hold closely all those who are suffering in so many ways nowadays. And may God give all of you his peace.